how are you supposed to effectively run a business if everything stays the same except for the fees of operation, and that increases by 41%? That means you'd have to been running at a 42% margin to still be running at a profit of 1%. No, totally. I think it should still stay as like free capital. But we all know everything in the airport costs more. At least over here in the States, everything in the airport costs just substantially more, and that's a cost that the people eat. But I'd rather have a cheap airline ticket than cheap food at the airport. Okay, Indigo's business empire crumbling. Business case study. Now, apparently, I was told if I was ever going to go to India to use Indigo, and then I saw this video, and I was like, I might not be able to go in time.
A few years ago, Indigo was making headlines because it was redefining the rules of aviation in India.
Indigo is the only Indian airline that is running profitably in a challenging aviation environment.
The Indian budget carrier Indigo has confirmed it is purchasing 300 Airbus planes.
Indigo has enjoyed near unprecedented growth in less than 20 years.
India is known as the graveyard of airlines, and that is because in India...
Damn, that is a terrible fucking name. A graveyard of airlines?
India, airline companies keep going bankrupt every now and then.
The Indian aviation sector,
I mean, so do we, but our government just keeps bailing them out.
is going through testing times.
Capacity and low fares may be excellent for users, but aviation companies are bleeding.
Many airlines have gone bankrupt.
Go First became the second airline in 4 years to
Like, the government helped Boeing out, and I think Spirit Airlines is hitting bankruptcy here soon.
ground operations, while SpiceJet is also struggling with default on lease rental payments.
But even in this firestorm of bankruptcy, only one airline was an exception, and that was Indigo Airline. Just look at this. While Jet Airways was drowning under a massive loss of 2,097 crores, SpiceJet was struggling with a loss of 687 crores. But Indigo was soaring with an astounding profit of 1,300 crores.
Yeah, with the amount of people in India, it's kind of blowing my mind that there's not a thriving infrastructure on transportation.
And Indigo wasn't just surviving, it was dominating the industry with a 60% market share. And 2 years back, we made a video on the rise of Indigo. But on 25th of October 2024, Indigo dropped a bombshell. Indigo released its quarterly report, and it was absolutely shocking because now Indigo is facing a massive loss.
Largest airline, Indigo, has reported a significant net loss.
There is a drop in margin. This is one of the slowest quarterly growth what you've reported in about 12 quarters. What has led to this decline?
If you look at this graph,
I wonder if this has anything to do with COVID and the backlog effects of, you know, infrastructure on shipping and distribution around the world, and just a lack of just traveling and tourism.
Their expenses have shot up by 3,000 crores and their profits took a massive hit to go from 189 crores in profits to a painful loss of 987 crores. So suddenly, the airline that once set the gold standard for profitability in India is now stuck in a financial turbulence just like everybody else. So we went through some heavy research reports to understand how is Indigo, the legendary airline, struggling to make a profit? What exactly are the market conditions that are bleeding the greatest airline in Indian history? And if Indigo itself is struggling to stay in the air, what does it mean for the future of Indian aviation? Are we headed towards a future without a profitable airline at all?
I doubt that. It'll have a course correction.
Before we move on, let me introduce you to our kind partners of this episode, which is Odoo. People, running a business is tough and managing expenses even tougher. But what if there was a way to save time and stay organized? Here's where Odoo Expenses can help you out. With Odoo Expenses, you can submit your expenses from desktop, mobile, or by emailing receipts. All your expenses are going to save a lot of time and headache. And guess what? Features of Odoo from 1 seat per kilometer. Define the business of an airline. Firstly, we have something called RASK, or Revenue Per Available Seat Per Kilometer. RASK is basically the income earned from 1 seat per kilometer. Now, if you look at Indigo, the revenue that Indigo has earned per seat per kilometer has increased from 4.25 rupees in September 2023 to 4.45 rupees in September 24. Then we have something called load factor. The load factor represents the percentage of available
I know all about the load factor. You know what I'm saying?
seats that are filled by the passengers. So it shows how well an airline is utilizing its seat capacity. For example, if Lufthansa Airways operates with a flight with 200 available seats and 60 seats are
That's what they're
occupied,
talking about.
then the load factor is 60 divided by 200 into 100 equal to 30%. So 30% of Lufthansa seats are occupied by passengers and 70% is empty. Now if you look at
Damn.
the airlines in India and compare them with Indigo, while Air India has a load factor of 96.4%, SpiceJet stands at 93.4%. Whereas on the other hand, Indigo's load factor is 94.1%. Now, if we talk about fleet size, Indigo has the largest fleet of 367 aircrafts, whereas Air India stands at 300 aircrafts and SpiceJet only has 51 aircrafts. So just think about it. In spite of having such a large fleet, Indigo is leading in both efficiency and scale. And lastly, if you look at the revenue in the last 3 years, you will see that their revenue has shot up from 26,655 crores in FY22 to 71,229 crores in FY24. So everything looks good for Indigo, right? The revenue per seat per kilometer is growing, the load factor is very high, so it's operating at peak efficiency, and even their revenue.
But how much loans do they owe? How if everything is growing, do they not have like do they not own the planes outright and now they're having to pay the loans for it and the loans are catching up? Like, what's going on?
Is growing very, very quickly. Then the question is, what on earth is wrong with Indigo and how did they suddenly have an expense increase of 3,000 crores and get into a loss of 900 crores? Well, let's understand these reasons one by one. The first reason is very common for the aviation industry, which is the volatile fuel cost. Did you know that fuel is one of the biggest expenses for airlines? It makes up anywhere between 35 to 40% of their total expenditure. And this is where Indigo fell into a trap.
I didn't think about that.
Let me explain how. If you see this chart, you will see how volatile the oil prices are. In June 2023, the price was around $70 per barrel. But in just 4 months, by October,
Whoa.
the price shot up to $95.
Whoa! It increased $25 per barrel. Oh my god.
A barrel. And then it again came down to $70 by January.
What the hell?
So within just 90 days, your prices may shoot up by 30%, which then increases your cost. For Indigo, fuel cost is 37.19% of their revenue and their net margins stand at 11.5%. So if you buy a ticket from Ahmedabad to Bengaluru for 8,000 rupees 1 month in advance, in this 8,000 rupees, 3,000 rupees is the fuel cost and 900 rupees as in 11.5% is the net profit margin. But
damn.
Because of the Russia-Ukraine war, if the oil prices suddenly shoot up from $80 a barrel to $100 a barrel in just 1 month, the fuel cost in your ticket has shot up from 3,000 rupees to 3,900 rupees. So this 900 rupees of profit is already
gone
to zero because now oil costs 900 rupees extra. So simply because of a war, Indigo will see its profit margins disappear into thin air. Now, you might say, bro, airlines can consider this variation and then set their prices, can't they? Well, yes, they can.
Yeah, but if something's going up 30% in 3 months and then 30% down in the next 3, it's kind of hard to predict, no?
But the oil prices are so volatile that catering to a price-sensitive market like India, while keeping extra margin for oil prices becomes a very, very difficult task. Because even if you increase the price by 500 rupees, the customers will stop opting for your airline. In fact, Indigo calls itself a low-cost carrier. So passing on the rising cost to the customers is very difficult for Indigo. If you look at Indigo in 2024, you will see that Indigo's fuel expenses increased by 12.8%, jumping from 5,856 crores in September 20.
Is this just an airfare thing? If you guys can let me know in the comments or here in the chat. Because there's once more, I love seeing the parallels right now to India and America. And right now in America, these past 4 years, everything has gotten so expensive to where it's getting so hard to live. Like, I'm making the most amount of money I ever have right now because of my IRL job. But it still feels like I'm right out of college or right out of high school.
2023 to 6,605.2 crores in September 2024. As a result, the oil cost started eating into the profit margin of Indigo. This is the first reason for Indigo's loss. The second reason is the grounded aeroplanes and operational issues. As we saw in our Go First episode, the entire aviation market of India saw some serious issues because of the Pratt and Whitney engine problems.
Go First says Pratt and Whitney supplied faulty engines, so they could not operate the planes, and this has led to direct losses.
The company has been facing issues with its current Pratt and Whitney engines.
That's the engine what they are talking about, are grounded because of faulty engines.
Go First grounded just 7% of its fleet. 3 years later, this number surged to 50%, 50% of the planes were not operational.
Unfortunately, Pratt and Whitney, the engine manufacturer, has completely deceived us.
And at one point in Q1 of FY24,
Completely deceived us. Oh my god.
over 70 of Indigo's planes were stuck on the ground.
Indigo Airlines' fleet is grounded.
I didn't even think about the fleet just being broken.
Back in the month of February this year, aircraft groundings for Indigo almost doubled to over 70.
And do you know
What's going on?
how costly this is? Look
It's fucking costly.
at this. In FY24, Indigo generated a revenue of 71,231 crores with a fleet of
You know, the mechanics over there are just thinking like, hey,
approximately 367 aircrafts, which
we
comes
getting
down
paid.
to 194 crore rupees in revenue per aircraft per year. So each aircraft is capable of generating 194 crores a year, and 60 aircrafts together could generate a revenue of 11,640 crores a year.
Or you can lose that much because they're all on the ground.
So Indigo's revenue was bleeding by 11,640 crores because of these grounded aircrafts. And you know what? To fix this problem, Indigo decided to take some planes on a short-term lease so that they could still keep serving their customers. And this leasing is called ACMI, or
Boom, I called it. I was like, where's the lease? Where's the debt coming from? Where's the overhead?
aircraft crew maintenance and insurance. And all these temporary issues like the emergency lease, the maintenance of grounded planes, and the high cost of ACMI leases, all of them have pushed Indigo's lease expenses up by a staggering 290.5%. So their lease costs have jumped up from 195.6 crores last year to 763.6 crores now, marking a staggering increase in their expenses. On top of that, their additional rentals and repair costs have also gone up by nearly 30%. And thirdly, even non-fuel operating expenses like landing fees, parking fees, terminal navigation charges, parking service fees, and ground handling fees, all of them have also increased substantially in the past 1 year. In fact, if you look at the airport charges at airports like Bengaluru, Hyderabad, Chennai, Kolkata, and Kochi have increased anywhere between 2% to 200% this year.
Holy hell.
And in all, for Indigo, airport charges and fees have increased by 41% from last year.
How are you supposed to effectively run a business if everything stays the same except for the fees of operation, and that increases by 41%? That means you would have to been running at a 42% margin to still be running at a profit of 1%. That's
These are the
insane.
reasons why Indigo is in a massive loss. In fact, all airlines in India right now are in losses due to the same reasons. So the question is, what exactly is Indigo doing to fix this problem?
I'm constantly on the go and on my feet, so I'm so glad that I found these Adapt runners from Flux. They have a
Well, Indigo is already preparing for recovery and long-term growth. Look at this. For the first time, Indigo is planning to introduce a business class cabin on the Delhi-Mumbai route. And this is a huge shift away from their low-cost philosophy. Secondly, because of the increasing domestic competition, Indigo is focusing on international expansion. If you see, they're already adding new international routes like Sri Lanka and Malaysia to increase their overall revenue. And lastly, they've launched a loyalty program called Blue Chip to increase repeat customers. But as of now, unfortunately, Indigo is bleeding with losses. And you know what, guys? If you keep aside Indigo, there is a very important question that we need to ask about the aviation industry of India. And this question is that if the greatest and the most efficient airline in our history is bleeding with losses, then does it even make sense to run an airline in India? Because even at 71,000 crores in revenue, you have a razor thin margin of just 11.5%. And this margin could also disappear due to a random war. It could disappear due to increasing oil prices. It could disappear due to recession. And to make matters worse, as you achieve scale, the risk in your business also keeps on increasing. Then the question is, why are brands like Tata, Indigo and Akasa so keen to enter the Indian aviation space? Well, the optimists say that India is a great market. Why? Because the demand in the airline industry is expected to only increase due to the rising middle class
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
population, and the international traffic is also growing very fast. Look at this report. It says that in FY24, domestic passenger traffic is growing at 13.5% and international traffic is also set to increase by 22.3% to 69.64 million passengers. If you see 69 million as a number, it's almost the entire population of Germany. In fact, India has now surpassed Brazil and Indonesia to become the third largest domestic aviation market after China and US. While
That's not surprising though.
we have around 15.5 million seats, China has 67.8 million, and the US stands at 86.1 million. So a big market is set to bring great opportunities and great scale, which is why a lot of these brands are very bullish in the Indian aviation space. But the one thing that we need to keep in mind is that if India has to keep on growing, there are three challenges that we need to tackle. Number one, we need more airports. Number two, we need to increase our per capita income through jobs and FDI so that the aviation industry of India survives. And most importantly, the government needs to increase the ease of doing business to support the aviation companies in India, because after all,
those fees are insane.
Without them, India would just be a slow country. And if the airport fees become too unviable, then two things could happen. Number one, either the government might ask airports to decrease their fees to airlines, which means the airports might increase their fees from the restaurants and stores. Or number two, the government might fund the airports, which I think is a terrible idea because it will bleed the government.
No, totally. I think it should still stay as like capital, like free capital. But we all know everything in the airport costs more. At least over here in the States, everything in the airport costs just substantially more. And that's a cost that the people eat. But I'd rather have a cheap airline ticket than cheap food at the airport.
This is the reason why Indigo is in a crisis. And I just hope you learned something valuable about India's aviation market. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button.
He always does such a good job on these, and I appreciate the recommendations on all of these videos. But it does surprise me with India's population that there's not a thriving business, and I'm surprised that the Tata Empire did not set up some kind of infrastructure for them to make revenue off transportation, whether it be through aviation or automobile, or both. I mean, especially in today's day and age, I know the money over there, the amount of billionaires over there, I'm surprised one billionaire hasn't created like a revolutionary infrastructure that's like an Uber or that of like the airways as well. It's very shocking. But I say it now, in the next 5 to 10 years, I'm sure y'all figure it out. But with that said, if you guys like the way the words are flowing out my mouth, like the video, share with your friends. Let me know what you want me to react to next, what you want my 2 cents to be on the matter. But if you're joining me live over here on Twitch, it's time to lock in and play some games, baby.